Welcome back to Lock and Reload. So I have a receiver cover from a Remington Nylon 66. This is a buddy of mine's rifle that I'm going to go ahead and refinish. I'm also going to go ahead and re-blue the barrel on top of that. But we're only going to shoot the re-bluing process on the actual receiver cover. The whole reason that he wants to go ahead and get this re-blued is, one, for protection purposes, and two, he's had this rifle since he was 13 years old. So we're going to go ahead and do a re-blue it to the best of my ability, and hopefully get it back to as close to factory condition as possible. We're re-bluing it for a couple different reasons. We've got a bunch of rusting going on here on the receiver cover itself, on the actual, on both sides, right by the stamp scope rail as well too. See that? Now this is the first time I've ever dealt with a Remington Nylon 66, so after I'm done with the project, I'm gonna try to shoot a video on it. This is not a part series by any means. This is actually just a bluing video, so don't expect a series on the Nylon 66. This is just showing you how I blue and the different ways of bluing and what products I use. So as you can see, that's what we're going to be bluing. Alright, some of the products. First and foremost, for a bluing solution, I use Oxyfull Blue by Brownell. They come in liquid form and then they come in the paste gel form, which that's what I've got. Is Oxyfull Blue. To coincide with that, generally you want to use cotton balls, Q-tips. I just use a terry cloth. It works pretty good, because all you're doing is letting it set in, and we'll go through the process of cold bluing. Even though it is cold bluing, I do use a form of heat. I do use my little mag torch, because it accelerates the process. Also, I use my various steel wools. I've got my coarse steel wool, or excuse me, my coarse steel wool. I've got my double O steel wool and my triple fine steel wool that I use. And that's my sanding. And I probably will use sandpaper as well, but y'all know what sandpaper is in the different grits, so that's not going to be featured. Now, I am going to be using probably Break Freeze Powder Blast for a degreaser. I don't know if you guys know a whole lot about Brownell's Oxyfull Blue. This is not like your Birchwood Casey. Generally, you want this receiver cover as clean as possible, but even if you have small deposits or residual oil, not recommended. Try to get it as clean as possible anyway, but if you have small pockets of residual oil on here, not a big deal. This Oxyfull Blue does cut through it. So that being said, these are just some of the tools that I use for re-bluing. I paste this steel as you see. So let's go ahead and go through the process on how I re-blue. Alright, so my first process is going ahead and analyzing what has to be done. With this one, I've got some rusting on here, all over here, and I want to go ahead and assess that. And make sure that I've got enough bluing solution to go ahead and do this. That being said, after you go ahead and make your assessment, my first product that I start off with is a very coarse steel wool. The reason I go with a really coarse steel wool is it's going to take off all the residual rusting fairly simple. And again, I didn't notate this, but I'm also going to be using a 1500 grit automotive sandpaper too. So with this one, you just go ahead and just go over it like so. You're going to see some form of shine. Some people will use a sandblaster block like this to go ahead and really take it off. I mean, I can do so. The only reason I don't generally like to use sandpaper, although I think that is working a little bit better. Would you look at that? That's actually working quite nicely. And generally, you want to, if you're going to sand it or use steel wool, you want to go, if there's a such thing, go with the grain of the steel, or whatever the steel, what way the steel happens to be scraping on it. And then with that, take your time at doing this, because not that you're going to really take metal off it, but you want to make sure that you're not having some unusual scratch patterns in it. But just get it cleaned up the best as possible. With that, I mean, a lot of the rust is disappearing. So then we'll just go on the other side too. And because what you want to do with this is, make sure you're eliminating as much as the rust as possible. And I'm going to try to get a lot of this removed off camera. Otherwise you're going to be staring at me sanding this till the end of time. So the rest of the sanding I'm probably going to go ahead and do off camera. Alright, as you can see, now we're extremely in the white. Now I got majority of the rust off with sandpaper and a very coarse steel wool. A lot of the bulk of it. The rusting, for the most part, is gone. But I ran into an issue with it. There is a little bit of pitting on the inside of here. If you look here, you can actually see a little bit of pitting. Like, the rust is gone, it's smooth. But that rust left some pitting. And it left a little bit on the right side of the receiver cover, but it's mostly on the left side, up on the top or rear part of the receiver where it meets the actual stock. So we got some minor pitting. Now what I do to, I'm going to end up smoothing this out some more, and again I'm going to be taking 1500 grit sandpaper, as you see here, and we're going to go ahead and try to smooth the rest of that out with 1500 grit sandpaper. And yeah, because all I do is, I just rub that down, and you want to sand it until you have not a mirror finish, but a smooth, very smooth finish. And generally that's going to end up smoothing everything out. You can use oil to help guide you with that, and just to go ahead and get everything else smoothed out, because you want, before you glue it, you're going to want this thing as smooth as possible. So alright, so we have finished up with the 1500 grit automotive sandpaper. And for the most part, we have this surface really smooth, full of hand oil too, or oils from my hands. And that's probably the best I'm going to get the pitted steel, honestly. The bluing will cover up a lot of that, and it should not rust any longer after everything's blued. So this is the finished result after going ahead and taking your sander block and your steel wool and 1500 grit sandpaper. So let's continue on with. Alright, so now I'm going to go ahead and take my brake free, and I'm going to quite literally spray it down just to get any residual oil off it and wipe it down, because this generally takes care of any of the residual oils on it. Then we go ahead and take a towel, preferably a clean one, and then we just go ahead and wipe it down, and it should take care of most of the oils. Should. And then for the most part, we should be ready to go ahead and re-blue. Alright, once you went ahead and applied the degreaser and went ahead and cleaned it, these are the 4 tools you're going to need. First off, you're going to need your bluing applicator, which generally you want to use cotton balls, but I use a terry cloth. It works just fine. Triple fine steel wool, a mag torch, not necessary, but it helps with the process. Brownells, Oxfo Blue, or whatever bluing solution that you use. So now we're going to go ahead and start bluing this receiver cover. Alright, the first thing I do is I grab my little mag torch. What I'll do is what I do is I go ahead and I heat up the metal, not cherry, but just apply some heat to it. Just warm up the metal. You don't want to apply too much heat because you run the potential of warping it, because it is stamped steel if you're running with the stamped steel part. And it should be fairly warm. What I do is take my Oxfo Blue, and this bottle's almost out. I'm gonna have to order some more. But I mean, you can be pretty liberal about it. Not as liberal as Obama and his administration, but. And then what I do is I'll go ahead and I'll start applying it. Just on one side right away. And what I do is I will go ahead and let that sit for about a minute or so, and then get everything wiped off, and that would be the first coat. To get the color that you want, you're probably gonna have to put, a couple different coats, 1 to 5, or how many ever you use to go ahead and coat it. What I'll use is a factory finish. This is the barrel, and I will use this as a reference before I go ahead and re-blue this, to give me a good gauge on how much this thing's got to be re-blued. So after that process I'm going to go ahead and wipe this off, and so this is with the first coat. After the first coat, everything, obviously you take your rag and wipe everything off after about a minute. Now I'm going to go ahead and take my triple fine steel wool. And what I do is, because you have this weird discoloring, you've got an actual blue color on both sides. What you want to do is you want to go ahead and even that out. And what I do is I'll take steel wool. It actually takes some of the finish off. And what I'll do is I'll go ahead and smooth everything out on that with triple fine steel wool. And just to smooth everything out. And yeah, you continue this process as needed to go ahead and try to match everything up. Now mind you, when you use triple fine steel wool, you do actually take some of it off. hence why you've got to repeat the process. But for the best results, they recommend doing this. And what I do after I'm done doing this, what I'll do is I'll have this sit for 5 or 10 minutes before I apply my next coat. And what I'll do is I'll end up reheating this up again. And after I fire it, then I go ahead and let it sit for about 5-10 minutes. Alright, so now we're ready for the second coat. I'm assuming I'm probably going to have this done in probably 3 coats. But don't quote me on that. So now we're ready to go ahead and apply the second coat. Now this Then what I'm going to want to do is go ahead and let that sit for about a minute or so. While it's sitting, go ahead, smoke, do what you got to do until that is finished. So after about a minute or so, you probably should be ready to go ahead and wipe the rest of the second coat off. And this is probably the last coat I'm gonna, show on camera. Honestly, just follow the directions on the bottle of, whatever bluing. So for me firing it on the second coat and then going through with the triple fine steel wool again. No audio from me. You can just watch it, see how that works, and hopefully this helps you on your next re-bluing project. So at any rate, this is LockNReload with cold bluing, a receiver cover from a Remington Nylon 66, or whatever project you want to go ahead and re-blue. As always, catch you later.
She said, I've got Napoleon complex. I don't know why, but I think she's right.